It's true, we weren't sure we were gonna be able to stay out of the, out of quarantine, but now that we're out of it, as I said, my hair is forming weird waves. There's a lot more gray that people have commented on, but I'm looking forward to having it, transformed in the way that you know how.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Messed up. Yeah. But I'm so glad we're all here together and that we can be back in a space of self-care, because I know that, especially in the darkest moments of being in the pandemic, what I missed most was being able to come to a queer space, being able to sit down, have a conversation, be together and engage in, this radical act of self-care together, a political act, as Audre Lorde always reminds us.
Yeah, definitely. I got to show Karen on Zoom Instagram
I think
Live
I
how to
tuned
do
in for that.
haircuts.
I watched that for like a little bit. I was like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean, it was also fun to be able to teach that and to show that in a way. Like, this is my craft. This is how I try to make people feel good about themselves. And I know your head well enough to be like, oh, Sarah, don't go over here, because you're going to get in trouble, you know?
You feel good enough to do it a second time? Third time?
I don't know. We'll see. Well, let's speaking of, let's get into this. I was 19 and I was in college, and that's when I.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. But so were you also 19 and decide? Well, I mean, I don't know. I was 19. I think that I had known or understood my own queerness inside for a very long time, but it wasn't until college shenanigans, game of spin the bottle, and of course getting your first the kiss, the first time I kissed a woman, I was like, wait, I like this.
Yeah.
What do I do with it? And I think that's something that I had been fighting against for so long. Ended up, coming out in that drunken moment of spin the bottle, and it couldn't be put back into the bottle after that. So, So anyway, how about you?
How about me? Well, I'm a product of the internet.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't have the internet. I had to order calendars with Martina Navratilova in it via the mail, Right?
Yeah. So I'm a product of the internet, and do you know what Tumblr is?
I do. Of course, I know what Tumblr
Okay.
is. You had to do it for my class.
Oh, I did. Yeah. Okay.
I know. Yeah. So Tumblr, the online platform.
Yeah. So Tumblr, I think, it's not that big anymore, but when it was in its peak, I'm thinking 2013 to 2016 really, it was a very big spot to just to learn about different ways of, I think, being, and then it got, if you went really deep, you could learn about gender variance and how different ways of expressing yourself. And so it when I first made my first Tumblr account and I was starting to learn all these things, I was like, oh, there are more people like this. And it's very interesting when you have a whole generation of young people, I think, who can learn so much in a matter of seconds and just be connected with so many people in a matter of seconds. And it was very interesting because when I talked to a lot of my friends, so much of our childhood, teenage experience is on the internet. I think the other day I was like, hey, what YouTubers raised you as a child? Because it's I people can name drop so many, I think, queer icons that we've discovered online. And it's definitely very interesting because you can have such a very cultivated space online, and then you can have the real world, which is its own thing. And so I think at a very young age, I think I lived a double life.
So I don't know, Madin, you're kind of between us generationally. So, if what we have on one hand is a digital sexual and gender formed identity, and on one hand, an analog mail order catalog. What's your experience as someone kind of in between those worlds?
You know, I'd say a lot of my friends experimented in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. I wanted partnership, you know, and it wasn't until I'd say I was out of high school and working in the salon that I was like, oh, there's representations of that here. I get to meet so many different kinds of people. I might be able to see a version of myself, you know.
So not only do you open the doors to different members of the LGBT community coming through, but it becomes a point of self-education, growth, like, you know,
Right.
your own kind of self-creation to meet
Yeah.
people.
My clients were my internet.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about how we all got together, or how we were all connected in some way. And, you know, and actually, obviously, it was hair that brought me to Madin. And the situation was that my longtime hairstylist, who was a trans woman, who was a black trans woman here in LA, got sick very suddenly and passed away. And that was pretty traumatic because, you know, it was a situation. I'd been going to her for 8 years. I'd been with her through her transition, actually, and not only, you know, her gender transition, but she became her own salon owner, a business owner in West Hollywood, which was, you know, incredible and rare, and she was so proud of it. And within a couple of years of that, and within a couple of years of her transition and finding so much joy in that, she got sick, and within like months, passed away. She missed an appointment. And I remember at that time, I was like, what am I gonna do? This is a person who I could trust with my hair, who knows that I don't want a short women's cut, but a masculine cut, you know, for myself, right? And somebody who's on top of the forms of masculine haircut that would be appealing to me. So I turned to the queer community and asked around, and that's how I got sent to Madin. And I remember being kind of distraught, not knowing, because when you start a new relationship with a hairstylist, a relationship with a hairstylist is more than just somebody who cuts your hair. It's somebody, like I said, who holds your sense of self, who, you know, I always use the word therapist, like a therapist, but you know, who does your hair. Somebody who sometimes hears the difficulty you're going through, and I found them, and Madin, you know, then told me about their vision for what therapy and other forms of political care and other forms of, I don't know, community building they do, and that was like sort of, that's how I found my way to Madin. And then Madin, like after we found each other and we've been together for a while, Reeves came into both of our lives almost simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that go? How did
that
you
go?
find Madin? Because I know that you were in my class at USC, and I immediately thought, first of all, that was a great class. All of you were so cool and so young, and so, like, it was like the queerest, most gender fluid, amazing class, most racially diverse class I've had at USC in like decades. But had you been to ProjectQ before you took my class, or?
I have, yeah.
Oh, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, because I don't think I mentioned it in class. So I think it was, Madin is the one who told me about, we both, Madin and I both told each other about you.
Oh, that's how that happened.
Because, yeah. So how did you find ProjectQ?
How did I find ProjectQ? So I moved out here for school. I'm from like the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And I was absolutely terrified. And I reached out to some friends. I was like, hey, I'm in a completely new location. I've been replanted in Los Angeles. Where can I go to find a space? And somebody recommended ProjectQ. And
What kind of space were you looking for? What kind of space did you ask
So
for?
in DC, we have a kind of center called Whitman Walker, which is a drop-in center where you could like go into DC, even if you're from the surrounding states, and just kind of hang out for the day. They have programming. It's just a really safe place to meet people your age. And I wanted something like similar because I think I have a very different background than the average USC student. And so it was absolutely terrifying being there. And so I wanted to find somewhere where I felt safe, where I could be around other queer people, other trans people of color.
That's really important, though, the specificity of finding queer and trans people of color. Because I think that when you go to a city and people tell you, okay, where are the queer, trans, LGBT spots, you know, whatever, the whole acronym rainbow, where is that? People direct you to gay, white, male spaces. And so being really specific is really helpful because somebody's like then sends you, I don't know, like the Abbey or whatever, which is definitely, which is fun, but it's a different flavor. And it sounds like you were looking for
somewhere cozy,
a place to be able to talk to other people who are like you in some way. So someone told you about it.
A friend told me about it. I was like, hey, just go say hi. Go say hi to Madin.
You're also a world builder because you write films.
Yeah, I do.
So, what do you take from that, or what do you take from your experience in this space that you think you'll carry over into the work that you're putting into the world or hoping to put into the world?
I want to know this too.
So I've been writing a lot about failure recently. I think one thing that stood out to me, and I don't think I've ever really had a chance to talk about this, but one thing that stood out to me about Octavia's books, I say that casually, Butler's books, is I'm thinking of Parable of the Sower, and the very first book from her I read, which was Kindred. I read it for fun in like 8th grade. And there's just something very interesting about both of these protagonists being introduced in a world that expects them to fail, where it's just built for them to fail. And when I think about maybe being Black, being trans, being masculine in very different ways, I think for me to exist, I was supposed to fail. And I think it's very, very interesting when, as reflected, I think, in Parable of the Sower, just the entire situation was not built for success for the main character, just to say the least.
Well, it was already emerging from a space of social failure.
Yeah. And I think being comfortable with failure is something that I'm very, very interested in writing about. That's something that I want to write about, particularly with, like, I think spaces like ProjectQ. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And then one thing I just want to take with me as I continue to write is, like, even if you think it's going to fail, you should still do it anyways. Even if there's no precedent for it. Like, the only thing stopping me is myself. It's not even failure that's going to stop me. And that's something I think is very, something I adore about this space and also the books.
I'm going to get your neckline.
Okay.
It might get a little loud.
Okay, great.
How are you liking your hair so far?
It's great. I love it. It's like, look, it's got to flow like I can style it like,
you can still have your skater boy
exactly.
if you want it. A little Keanu Reeves in front if you need
a little Keanu.
A little less Liza, a little more Keanu.
Yeah, exactly. This was what was starting to get, like, it was getting a little Bruce Lee, not that that's a bad thing, but like the 70s thing, I wasn't sure that I was ready to
more
throw
of an
back
era.
all the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just bring it to 90s instead of 70s.
Or whatever, the early aughts, which I guess is what's returning now.
That's weird.
So, Reeves, I actually don't know, how old are you? Do you mind me asking?
Oh, I'm 21. Thank you for asking.
21? So you also now can just walk into a bar finally. Once they reopen. And I came out in 1992. So, like, I was like maybe 1 month or 2 months gay before I made the first vote for president, right?
Yes.
But so that that made a huge difference. But that said, the way it was all framed and that kind of neoliberal framework of it at the time was very much about, like, respectability, corporate like emergence, you know, like commodities, like, and gay men were at the forefront. There was actually a postcard that like, you know, queer folks had of Bill Clinton and Al Gore, like their heads superimposed on two muscle queens with rainbow rings and dog tags around them. And that was like, you know, that was ubiquitous. But that was the extent of like, I think a kind of mainstream gay imaginary, right? Of course there was the ballroom scene, there were so many other things happening in big cities and especially like majority cities of color, but I was growing up in the suburbs, right? So it was a little different. And so that was kind of the extent of it. Like, yeah, imagine you show up in the organization on campus for queer folks is the Gay and Lesbian Association. And now at USC, it's like the LGBTQ plus resource center or whatever.
Yeah.
And so so even just the kind of pronoun shift between generations, and probably in between it was like LGB and then maybe T added on probably within your time and space.
Even going as far like as more recent as QTPOC, like we didn't ProjectQ. I started it at the QPOC conference at CSUN. There was no T in it.
People of color.
Yeah, there was no T in it, and I was like, oh. When I realized people were starting to put, oh, it's QTPOC, and I was like, wait, what? Okay, so I'm a little behind, but I'm also trans, so yes, this works for me. But you know, even within that 10-year gap, to add T into it, because why would we not? This is who we are, right? To me, the term queer encompasses so many different identities, but we have to be specific in order to include folks. But yeah, I mean, I got married, we've been married for 6 years.
You and your...
Me and my wife, when we met, gay marriage wasn't legal. You know, even that was not that long ago.
6 years ago, you were 15.
I was.
So, you know...
Oh, you just did that math.
Yeah, I mean, well, so shall we wrap me up?
Yes, you are very, very
refreshed. Ready for the world.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
My turn.
Yeah, it's your turn. Get to
Yes, so
growth up there.
Lots of growth, yeah.
we wash first because you've been maintaining at home.
Yes.
And
My best. I've
The
done
best that you can.
mostly the sides and the back. The front is a situation, and the top I just kind of like let do whatever I wanted.
yeah, I mean, you like a specific shape. And
I do like that shape.
And you know how to make that happen. You're not new to cutting your own hair or cutting hair at all. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you did a great job. I think you did. I just want to make it easy for you to maintain from this point forward.
Understood. What does that look like?
So first I want to give you a full comb out and really clean up any spaces that maybe you can't see because your eyes are in the front of your head, not on the sides or on the back. Let me do that. And then clean up your sides. And then after it's dry, I want to see how your shape is sitting. And then, of course, we got to touch up your sideburns to make sure that they match your gender identity because that's really important.
Oh, yeah.
And I think from there, we'll let it dry and see if there's any curl patterns that are just popping out or that don't want to spring back up.
All right, cool.
The sides are really the gateway to
Oh,
gender
yeah.
identity, are
Yeah.
they not?
If
Like
there
it's
were-
like one tick away from
Yeah.
being Liza Minnelli or being masculine.
Yes.
Or, you know, yeah, exactly. Or like being misgendered or being gendered the way you want to be.
Yes, and like on the opposite end, people that are like, my Minnellis, don't get rid of my Minnellis, you know,
it's
they need to
it's
have
like,
it.
like, you know,
Yeah, it's a real thing. Here is more of an ice pick situation with Reeves, so it kind of like leads into the jawline.
Ah,
Yes, and is and
it's a little
can-
boy band.
Yeah.
a little boy band. a little John B, if you will.
Oh,
Take
John
that back
B,
a little
not
bit.
AJ Backstreet Boys. Yeah, so that's cool. So you've been maintaining your own hair also.
Yes.
And you were
yes.
talking earlier about how you used to just give yourself a haircut. You
I
taught
would.
yourself when you were young to give
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
a haircut because you were too stressed out to go get that done.
Oh yeah, like I tried going to a barbershop with a friend, and that still wasn't like cutting it. I was still freaked out, and you know, like even if I like did get in the chair, I would be shaking. And you can't get a haircut when you're like, you know, like that anxious about it. So I got clippers. I didn't know what I was doing, so I got beard clippers. And that's how I was cutting my hair, because I didn't realize that there was a difference. But yeah, like I think, again, being a child of the internet, you go on YouTube and you try your best with tutorials, and that's how I started.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you started doing this?
I was...
When you felt like you wanted to be responsible for your own hair?
About 17.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 17, 18 was was a big highlight in my coming out experience, because that was about the time where I kind of struck it out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like my last year of high school. And so during that time, I relied on friends for so much. I think even in terms of hair, I think I didn't necessarily have an address at the time, so I just had like the important beard clippers delivered to like a friend's place, like via Amazon. So that's the start of that.
I mean, Madin, how much did you serve as a counselor for folks dealing with different issues around gender specifically? Like, do you feel like you counsel a lot of folks through their gender transitions, or through their
journey,
questionings,
yeah,
through their gender journeys? Yeah. So like,
I'm the first people a lot of folks come out to.
Really?
Yeah, they want to look good and feel good, and they, I have to see them for that, or else I can't help them see themselves. So oftentimes folks will come out to me first, and then they're like, I'm coming out. Can you help other people see me the way I see myself? Is really what they're asking. And that's where I go, okay, yes, now let's sit and we talk. This is why these stools are a thing. Let's talk about what that means, because it really is different for everyone. It's we're a rainbow of folks in the way that we present ourselves. But it's kind of my favorite thing to help people feel good. And also, I grew up going to salons. A lot of young assigned female at birth folks do, kind of going in and getting a relaxer. They would go in and they'd straighten your hair, so now they want you to be as feminine as possible, but also as white adjacent as possible, and your natural texture is not cute. You don't wear that out. You have to get it straightened. Oh, get them edges done, all of that. Or going into a barbershop, and I've been told that they won't cut my hair before.
That's happened to me before.
It's happened to you before
so
as well, in the DMV?
Reviews from barbershops.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah, definitely. And similarly, I started doing my own hair, but I decided that I was going to do others' hair as well. And that's how, being from a pretty neglectful home, I was able to pay for bus tokens and lunch tickets and everything that was taking care of myself, even menstrual aid, the things that my body was doing that I needed. That's how I took care of myself, was by helping other people. And that's still true today. But having black, I love the barbershop experience, but I don't want to be misgendered or be hit on. That's another thing that happens sometimes in the barbershop, because they just assume that you swing one way or the other, or being misgendered, or not, being refused service altogether.
I want to ask you more about that, but Reeves, something that you just said right now was interesting to me, because earlier you talked about how you sort of thought people of your generation maybe had more openness, had more tolerance, especially in relation to sexuality, right? That, you were nervous about coming out to your friends, but it ended up being no big deal. But I'm wondering if you think the same thing applies around, I don't know, a certain sense of enlightenment or way of being related to race as it's tied to sexuality. Do you think your generation has, I don't know, a clearer grasp, or maybe more tolerance, or a wider berth and sense of understanding of these things? Or is it a little different along the lines of race, or when you bring race into the mix with sexuality?
I would say my generation definitely has a lot more, I think, language just to even describe some of the things that we experience in terms of gender and sexuality, even race. I think just the other day I was describing, my little sister asked me what intersectionality was. And I explained it to her, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like, it was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense, you know?
How old is your little sister?
My little, okay, so she's not that little. She's like 18. But, you know, I think just the fact that she could come with me with that very specific question, and that just the fact that that's in her lexicon, I think, speaks to how, maybe because of the internet, maybe because of something else, but just how much options we have for the words we use to talk about ourselves and describe each other, and how we discuss each other. I definitely think that a lot of the negative experiences, I think, with my gender and my sexuality probably come from older people.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, I'm still very baffled by that. I think, like for high school, for example, I think a lot of my teachers and administrators and just staff at my high school, I remember them just being so puzzled as to like puzzled as in it's like I'm an obstruction or a situation to deal with. And a lot of my support actually came from my classmates, and even like people in the year below, like the years below me, they were very, very, it was a non-issue. Like I said, like, you know, and it was just, I think this is a very 90s thing to say, but I think it was just a very much a...
Says the person who was born in 1999.
I definitely think that me coming into myself was very much a youth versus older generation situation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I've also had folks come to me with their negativity about my gender expression, and it was always folks that were older. Almost always. I'd say 99.9% of the time. But I think that there will always be some other fight to be fought. I think that really it's not necessarily that it gets better, but the woes of the elders are taken care of. So we were talking earlier about marriage equality, and so much of advocacy and policy that was done on behalf of the queer community was around marriage equality, as opposed to around homelessness, for instance, or around food, right? Like it was mostly AIDS, HIV, and marriage. Well, now all of those people that were fighting for those things are done. You know, and
they feel done.
Yeah, they've hung their hats. They're like, oh yes, it is. It does get better. It is better. We can all get married.
Let's
have brunch. But they're not turning around and making sure that people can use the restroom in the space that they feel most comfortable in, right? So I don't necessarily think that it gets better. I think that our needs change, and unless we change with the needs of the people that are going to be taking over for us, then we can't help, right? So kind of what's happening here is that intergenerationally, you've turned around and gone, oh, I got what I needed taken care of, now I'm gonna help this person, which is helping me. And I've turned around and gone, oh, I've gotten what I need, now I'm gonna take care of this person. And you walked in saying, how do I help y'all? Which is like, that's what builds the community.
But I guess that leads me to kind of think a little bit too about, you know, even the discussions that we've all been having about Black Lives Matter, about the uprisings of the summer of 2020 in the wake of George Floyd's death, and how people have been treating that as if it were a new thing to a certain extent, and how, you know, people like Patrisse Cullors had to remind people, wait, you know, Black Lives Matter began in like 2014, and that it's weird that we have this collective amnesia that we keep fighting these fights with different intensity at different points. So Ferguson, 2014, and then even all the way back here being in Los Angeles to the LA uprisings of 1992, which, you know, like changed the fabric of how we move through the city, how we coexist together, how even we interact just between us, me as a person of AAPI heritage, you know, in a space that's like a Black-owned business that's in Chinatown, like all of these confluences. So, I mean, I don't know, I'm throwing a bunch of things out there, but I think it's, you know, I wonder to what extent we can contextualize ProjectQ, what it does in these other social justice movements that have been building for a long time, that have been pointing, you know, the light at the centuries of systemic injustice
Yeah.
against Black people and people of color.
I mean, I feel as though 92 was kind of my first foray into that. What's interesting.
Do you know about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, could you like give me some background?
Enlightenment. So cameras are everywhere now. Well, they weren't then. The police violence against Black people was just as high and has fluctuated, but hasn't gone away. But cameras were literally video cameras that had a VHS tape in them, and one particular bout of violence upon Rodney King was actually videotaped in Simi Valley, and it caught national attention. And similarly to George Floyd and so many more of our folks that have passed on, due to police violence, our people weren't taking it. So there were what was called riots in the streets, but really was an uprising then, it's an uprising now, and we might have another uprising in a couple months, right? What was interesting is you see the memes all the time, like, police brutality is not new, cameras are. This is an exact correlation to that. So people ask oftentimes how we have a Black-owned business in Chinatown, and I've talked a lot with friends about this as well, but what happened during those riots, those uprisings, was looting. A lot of looting was going on. Folks were upset. They wanted to have revenge on society.
It was in the wake of the not guilty verdict. Of course, the police were found not guilty of using excessive force after the entire nation, and including President George Herbert Walker Bush, said the video is incontrovertible proof that these officers acted out of line, right? The Republican president at the time said that. And, the entire nation pretty much agreed, because it was a kind of rarity to have the extent of this brutality captured on video and broadcast all over TV. Because maybe it was captured on film, of course it was captured on film when we saw the civil rights marches and police brutality then, and all of those things. But the ubiquity of TV, network television, the nightly news cycle, all of that, and to have all of that happen, and then to have these cops who beat Rodney King within an inch of his life, and then be declared not guilty. The feeling, the repetition of that over and over again. The city of Los Angeles exploded. It's actually like, you're a USC student, I teach at USC. A lot of that went down very near and adjacent to USC. And into Koreatown. And that's where the tensions between, and Chinatown. And that's where tensions between the Black and AAPI communities, were also put to the test, different communities in Los Angeles, because, there's a whole complicated set of interactions there. So also with, certain business owners in Koreatown, driving up costs in certain places, for food.
And
excessively
already
policing.
food deserts.
Exactly, excessively policing, the Black communities who live nearby. And so all of this was a tinderbox, and that act of police brutality, in much the same way that there was an explosion in response to seeing George Floyd's death on television. So too did this happen in 1992, and that verdict happened. The city of Los Angeles erupted, and it's been a part of our legacy for a long time, trying to figure out how to heal, how to be in solidarity with each other across, immigrant and racialized communities in the city. And also, so when people talk about 2020, the summer of 2020 as a new thing, I like to try to remind folks that in 1992, it's this was, this has been going on, that's certainly longer than that, but we've been doing that work, at least in this city, together, since then.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really also emphasized the pain there was that the police went to white neighborhoods to protect them, to protect property, as opposed to going to AAPI neighborhoods to protect property. And so
to protect people from each other or whatever.
That's not a part of it. They wanted to make sure that people's property values stayed as high as it could. And that created even a further rift between the Black and AAPI communities, to the point where, you know, there's so many jokes in movies like How High and like a lot of cult Black films that is walking into a convenience store owned by an AAPI person and being followed around, or like that is all based upon this exact experience. And so when Rodney King, I'm gonna just call it Rodney King, happened, everybody wants to call it different things. A year later, I was in Kansas City, Missouri with my family visiting my great-grandmother, and I'm watching the news and I see that they said it's the anniversary of the Los Angeles riots is what they were calling them at the time. So the anniversary, and I'm 9, I think, at this time, and to me an anniversary is something that happens every year. So I'm thinking that back home, everything's on fire and people can't like get around and streets are blocked off, right? This is what I'm thinking is going on, and I just start crying. I thought to myself, how am I ever gonna own a business? 9 years old, already was curious if this is the purge. I'm thinking it's the purge that happens every year. How am I supposed to be able to actually have a business? So when we opened and I was bringing stuff from storage and from my home and from my trailer and putting them all in one centralized place, because this is my business now, I started crying. I said, if something like this happens again, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And also at the same time, completely understanding why my people need to fight. It's very polarizing to be able to have multiple truths live in our bodies at the same time. But how do we do it? We make sure that they're fed. We make sure that people have water and they feel good about themselves. That's all that I can do. I can't change laws or policy or end racism.
But
I
being
can
in
do that.
solidarity with the folks who are out, you know, expressing their wish to change, transform, and you know, end racism.
Right.
To restructure a country structured and built on racism and genocide. I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that though. If it feels like there was something really new in the summer of 2020, and what you think. I don't know. I know this sounds like an old person thing to ask a young person, but what do you think your generation is poised to do, or maybe wants other people to help out with what they're doing?
I don't know if this is a very unoriginal answer, but I think there's a lot of anger in my generation. I think a lot of that comes from like just the frustration of like, wait, this has been going on for so long and nothing has happened, you know? Because like I'm 21 and like, I think you said that the Rodney King
92.
situation happened in 92. So I think there is,
20 years ago.
and this also goes back to how easy it is to just learn things and get information. And I think there's a lot of anger for just, one, how long this has been going on, and like this is completely oversimplifying it, but I guess how easy it is to do harm. I think that is so frustrating for everybody. And the same, like my same little sister I mentioned earlier, like she went to a protest, I think over in Long Beach, and I think she got tear gassed, and she was like, you know, I don't want to do it again. I think it was like last summer, summer 2020, and she was like, you know, there, and I completely understood, like I was very worried, but I completely understood, because I remember, I mean, I think, yeah, we all watched TV at the time, like there were just like rubber bullets, there was like a lot of stuff happening, but like, I didn't even like want to even try to argue with anybody, like maybe stay safe or whatever, no, like there was just so much anger, I think. And I think that's a good thing. I think right now it's a bit of a job to somehow reckon anger, all this anger, and this, you know, all this anger of just how long everything has been going on, with thinking of what it would look like if this were not the situation. And I don't want to call it learned helplessness, but I think a lot of the anger comes from like, this is how it's going to be.
It's happened before and will happen again.
Yeah.
But also, just to finish a quote from earlier, you know, talking about the master's tools in the master's house, our job is actually to earn our way in and rearrange the furniture so that people like us feel more comfortable there. So that's talking about privilege, right? So I have a lot of very nice people in my life that have more privilege than I do in certain areas. I have more privilege than other people in my life in certain areas. And the point is to earn our way in and then move it all around and then put on some Biggie Smalls in the background so that we feel like we could sing along with each other.
Redistribute. I think that you know, I didn't always have like financial security, but now that I do have it, I think that, you know, what I tell a lot of folks, and what I tell even my own white partner actually, like during the uprisings in 2020, in the summer of 2020, you know, and in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and her just kind of wanting to be out in the streets and be like wanting to be seen protesting, like doing all those things. I was like, okay, let's have a conversation about this. Number one, I don't feel safe in the context of the pandemic necessarily being out in the streets. Not everybody can be. Some people, you know, feel better about it. But even if, you know, one of the things that you can do as a person of privilege, as a person who is white in this country and who grew up with a certain amount of privilege, is to, you know, listen, to find out where your skills are needed, to find out where your resources, financial and otherwise, are needed, and to not put yourself at the center of somebody else's story. I think that that's the thing that allies of all sorts need to learn, is that you can be a part of authoring this story, you can be part of a participant, a character in it, but I don't think that you should center yourself in a story that belongs to. So in other words, it's not about your feelings, it's not about making you feel less racist, it's about making the world less racist. It's about making this country, it's about transforming the structures of this country and breaking down those structures that you benefit from, even perhaps at a loss to yourself.
Right.
A loss to some of ourselves, in order to make it more equitable and fair for more people. And I think that that's sort of where, I mean, I don't know. See, look, the old person has a lot of advice to give out, but I think that that's one of the things that, first of all, I see in action, as you were saying, Madin, you know, rearranging furniture, but also redistributing becomes such an important idea. It's like thinking about your resources not just as, you know, another way to center yourself as part of the narrative. Part of what we're doing is trying to decenter whiteness, colonialism. We're trying to decolonize, we're trying to do all of those things. And what would help is if you know, take yourself out of the spotlight and instead do the transformative work of changing the systems that might benefit you, so that it benefits more people.
See, this is why I like elders. I really like going to you guys for advice on things. Because you guys give me things to work with, you know?
Yeah. Do you feel a little more equipped in that area?
I feel hopeful.
That's good. And
Wow.
not suspiciously. So.
Even more hopeful in this span of the few minutes we've been talking here.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had things to say, and I think that's just a testament to politely like your age.
Looking good.
Thank you, thank you.
Looking good, young gent.